All right, gang, welcome aboard. It's time once again for the weekly Mac Forum video chat. This was supposed to be the November 19th edition, but I got a phone call yesterday on my birthday, not too long before the show, so I was on the phone with my brother. Couldn't get that off in time, so we're running it for tonight, the November 20th edition. And we'll get that taken care of for you. We got a lot of stuff jammed into the show. Added a couple of extra things as kind of penance for not getting the show off last night. But as usual, there'll be links to everything in the show notes. So we'll get those up for you right after the show this week. And the show from 2 weeks ago, for some reason, never uploaded successfully. I'll try to take care of that one day this week, figure out what the problem is. We'll just kind of upload a bonus edition with some additional info that you might find useful. All right, first of all, let's get started. Let's dive right into the forum-related information here. For starters, some of you may have noticed that we spent about 2 days this past week where you weren't able to get into the forum, and if you got any kind of an error at all, it said something to the effect of that there was a database error. It's not your system, it's not anything you did. This was on the Mac forum side of the fence. Seems to be resolved now, so that's all taken care of. But one of the things that it does point out to you, anytime there's a forum glitch, as we start trying to correct whatever the issue was, and I'm not even sure what was causing this one, it would have to be up to our forum owners and managers to tell us that. But anytime we have forum-related issues, one of the things that comes to light is we have a few members, when it comes up and things are back up and running normal, they have trouble getting in. And once in a while, you know, they'll post us a contact us message saying, why can't I get in? And a large proportion of the time, it's an issue with their email and other information not kept current. So let's just take a look and see here. I'm going to pull up my notes, so I'm looking at something useful here. I do want to point out to you how to fix that little issue with your email and your other information. For starters, you want to be logged into the forum, which I am, as you can tell by my username up there in the upper corner of the screen. Along the right side, okay, right here, I'm going to go to settings. And when I do, I'm going to get a screen that looks like this. And I have a copy of that screen up already, just in case it didn't load. Now, as you can see, when I look down the side here, okay, I have some options. I can edit my profile and edit my email from there, or I can scroll down a little bit farther and edit my email and password. I won't walk through that right now, but it's a real straightforward process once you know where to look for it. So you can either edit your profile and get at it that way, or edit your email. And it's a good idea. In fact, the forum software for now for several months, maybe the last year, has required you to change your password periodically. So that's the panel where you want to do that. I wanted to be sure we pointed that out for you, so you had a lot less trouble getting back into things. Also, among other things that we need to look at for tonight's show, I want to point out a few other things that are going on that we need to talk about. First of all, this thread, how to back up OS 10, or how to back up macOS, whichever phraseology you want to use. It's a short thread at the moment. There are other threads on the forum, but I went ahead and listed this one because you can never have, it's never too late to start a backup, okay? The only time it's too late to start a backup is after you've lost your data. And as someone who has lost data before, either through my own error or hardware failure of various kinds, one of these days I could probably give you 20 minutes on stupid things I've done that have caused me to lose data, okay? We'll say that. You just conveniently forget that I said that. You didn't hear me say that I've caused my own data loss from time to time, okay? But it is true. Everyone's had some degree of data loss. So if you haven't started a backup plan, this particular user wanted to know, how do I go about getting all their they've got their documents backed up, and they want to back up the operating system. Now, my suggestion in the thread was to look at either SuperDuper or Carbon Copy Cloner. Both of those are widely used on the forum. Both of them will do a pretty good job copying the operating system. And there are other tools out there as well. So find something that you like, test it to see that it works. And I can't emphasize this enough, although I didn't say it in the thread yet. I think I'm going to add it as part of the post. When you create a clone, a bootable clone, which you can do with both of the pieces of software that I mentioned, test that clone, boot from it to make sure that it is working, okay? There is nothing, and trust me, I've had this experience, there is nothing worse than going to your clone because you need something or because you've had some kind of failure, and lo and behold, the clone doesn't load properly. I've had that experience, okay? I screamed for about 10 or 15 minutes, okay? It was not a pretty sight. All right, and also I want to point out, I have a link to another forum thread here in this series. It has more information on backups, and it also, if you look at post number 8 by member Randy B. Singer, you'll notice that he talks about the fact that as of, I believe it's 10.7.2, OS 10.7.2, the Time Machine backups are bootable to some extent, okay? And by that, it generally involves going into the recovery partition and recovering things from there. I have both. I have a clone and I have a Time Machine backup. Now, why would I have both? There's a place for both. First of all, with that clone, I can generally be back up and running, assuming my clone is current. I can be back up and running in less time than it takes me to restore files from Time Machine. It's not a knock against Time Machine. It's just, that's just the nature of the beast, so to speak. They do different things. Now, if I have a Time Machine, if I have a clone, why would I use a Time Machine backup? Okay, with a clone, I have to remember to do it. I have to set a reminder to do it. With Time Machine, not only does it handle things for me, it backs up any changes that I've made to the system, and it does it every hour. It does it on a rotation of about an hour. I can go back several weeks and find a file that I've worked on that I need, whereas I couldn't do that with a clone without taking some additional steps. All right, so take a good look at that thread and follow through with it. Get yourself a backup plan if you haven't already got one. All right, also, this thread has to do with a member wanting to know, how do you get a look at a folder full of files? Okay, if I've got some files that I want to look at, how can I do it? And this is someone's coming over from the Windows side of the equation and wanting to know, how do I duplicate some of that functionality that you see in Windows? Well, one way to do it, okay, I'm going to demonstrate one of them to you right now. It's called Quick Look. What I do with Quick Look, I'm going to single click on a file, and then I'm going to just tap. And there you can see there is the file. And because it's a movie, it starts playing. Quick Look will basically play just about anything that QuickTime can manage. Sound files, anything like that, movie files, QuickTime will handle. Anything like that, it handles. Now let's see. Let me give you an idea of some other things you can handle with QuickTime. Here's a PDF. QuickTime, Quick Look handles that really well. So that's one way to do things. If you need to look at a file, you simply click on the file, click once, you don't even need to open the file, and then tap the space bar, and it will open that file and let you look at it. If it's a movie, it's going to play that file. If it's regardless of what kind of file it is, if QuickTime can play it, if the Mac can see it as a native file, then it's going to probably play okay in Quick Look. Now, that's not your only way to do things. Let's assume that you want to edit files. You've got a folder full of files, and you know that you want to edit them, okay? Or you want to get a look, and maybe you want to do a little bit more than just look at them, okay? Another way to do that is to use Preview. And simply, I have Preview in my dock. Here it is right here. I can drop a bunch of files in it. And if I've got the sidebar showing, show you what that looks like. I've got the sidebar right here. As long as I've got this showing, this sidebar showing, I can scramble between a bunch of different files and then start editing if I need to. And then, of course, member Jake pointed us to another thing that he uses, and that is cover flow. Okay, cover flow is when you open a Finder window. Okay, cover flow is going to appear. This is the icon on the far right. Okay, here, and this is what cover flow looks like. Now, if I go down here and I look, let's go to my document folder for a second. Okay, I open that. I'm going to put it in cover flow mode, and now you can see I have a little icon. If you see a blank like this, it means that it's a file that cover flow doesn't quite know what to do with, but it's a good quick way to look. These, of course, are folders. You would have to open them up, but this gives you multiple ways to look at your folders and see which file you need. That's just a couple of options. Really, really handy ways to look at things. I use Quick Look most often. All right, and speaking of Quick Look, I've got an article here. This comes from a site that I go to occasionally. And what they've done, this is from Jeffrey Thurna, and it talks about some things you can do with Quick Look, some uses that you can make with Quick Look beyond just using the spacebar. First of all, it's a quick way, and this is something I use a lot. This is a quick way to get a look at a file before you restore or delete it. So you know if you're dealing with the right thing. You can look at pictures in a slideshow. You can use an index sheet to view multiple images. All of these things are in Quick Look. You can deal with file types. One of the things I want to point out too, and I'll get to this in just a second, I have a link to one of these sources. Sometimes you will find a file that Quick Look just doesn't natively deal with. There are sites on the net that have Quick Look plugins, and you can add these to your system, and then they'll be able to read those kinds of files. Let me give you an example. This is one site that has it. Here, one way to look at InDesign files. Here's a plugin that deals with a different kind of lossless image file. Here's one that plugin that deals with subtitle files, Quark Express, you name it. And there are a number of these sites. My suggestion to you would be do the following. If you have a file type that you use a lot, see if Quick Look will open it. If you use Quick Look a lot and you can't open that file in Quick Look and look at it, then the next step would be, okay, test the file to make sure the file is good. In other words, open it up in your application, make sure it's good. And if it is, then start searching for a Quick Look plugin that will handle things for you. Now, I do suggest that you add them one at a time. That way, if you've got one that maybe is giving you issues, because Quick Look plugins have been around for a while. Some of them may not be updated to work with the current operating system. So try them one or two at a time so they'll be easy to remove should you need to. All right, let's go ahead and let's move on. Here are some tips. I thought this was interesting. This is one of the pieces of bonus material that I added after last night. Okay, and that is, these are some tips about fixing an overheated Mac. This comes from the, I believe it's the Macworld UK site, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have a link to this in the show notes. Now, they're talking about an overheating MacBook in this article, but most of what they say applies to just about any of the Mac models. So if you're experiencing overheating on a desktop Mac, such as the iMac or the Mini, same thing will apply. A couple of things you want to be sure to look at. One thing is to take a quick look at the ventilation areas, the vents on the Mac, and see if they're clogged. If it's a notebook, you don't want to be using it on a blanket. The blanket's going to block the air vents. Typically, you want to use a Mac notebook by putting it on a hard surface, not on something soft like a blanket or a pillow or something of that nature. A couple of other things, you can use Activity Monitor to look for system processes and other things that are taking up too much time. Maybe you've got a program that's gotten stuck that you need to force quit. Different things that you can do to check the temperatures. Also, don't panic, particularly on a laptop. If it feels kind of warm to the touch, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's overheating. Apple's designs for their notebooks, ever since they've been using the aluminum cases, have deliberately used the aluminum casing almost as a radiator type of thing to release heat. So it's a little toasty if you want to sit it in your lap, but it does do a pretty good job of ventilating the heat. They give you some ideas about some software that you might use to check the temperatures. Don't panic. If you're not sure what a good temperature range is for your Mac, check the forum. Some of our knowledgeable hardware guys will be glad to chime in. I haven't looked up the temperature ranges on the current models. In fact, I haven't looked in quite some time because even under a heavy load, I've only had my MacBook, my 2008 MacBook Pro, shut down from overheating like once. And I never did figure out what caused it because the next time I went back to work on things, everything was fine and nothing was amiss. And it would literally run for hours and the temperature would go up to a certain point, it would stop. And I was starting to get a little worried because it was getting higher than I expected. And then as soon as I backed off of whatever CPU intensive task I was using, within a matter of a couple of minutes, the temperature would drop back down. So for the most part, the Mac does a pretty good job of regulating its own temperature. But this article has a lot of good advice if you are concerned about that. All right, now I want to show you, and I'm going to go ahead and take just a second and pull something up here. I'm going to have this in the show note as well. I want to tell you, I use Siri more than I used to. I still don't use it as much as some people do because I haven't really mastered everything that Siri can do. But I will tell you that one of the things that I've done with Siri that really annoys me, and I was so glad I found this article. Siri kind of annoys me for one reason. It consistently mispronounces my last name, and it's annoying. And every time I get a phone call from one of my family members, it mispronounces that name. Well, here's a way you can fix it. Now, I did a little screen capture last night of my iPhone screen, so you can see what this looks like on the screen. I'm going to go ahead and play this little QuickTime movie here. What you're going to do to make this work is go ahead and ask, let's say you have a contact that Siri is consistently mispronouncing. Ask Siri to show you that contact. Okay? Now, it just did. Now, as you can see, I've got 4 different contacts here from my name, and that's because I've got some duplicates in my contact list. I haven't cleared all of those out. All right, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to then pick one of those contact cards, and then, as you can see, it's going to start. Now, it's going to bring up the contact card, and then I'm going to tell it. Watch what the screen says. Hey, Siri, you're pronouncing it wrong. And now it's going to ask me, how do I pronounce the name? And it's going to show me the first name. It wants to know how to pronounce my first name. I tell it, and then say it. And when I say it, here's what's going to happen. It's going to bring up several options that it thinks I said. I'm going to pick one, okay? I'm going to pick the one that works, that's correct, out of that set, okay? And then I'm going to tell it select. Then it's going to move on to the pronunciation of the last name, which is the one it was messing up. Once again, I can hit play on each one of these, pick the one that's best, select. If none of them are right, I can click tell Siri again, and I can go back through the process and try to clear up the pronunciation, okay? Now, and it'll go through, it'll follow my directions, and as you'll see in just a second, what it will do is continue, and see, I tried each one of them, and now it says this is how we'll pronounce it from now on. Now, I will tell you, there's one thing I have to warn you about this. If you have multiple people with the same last name, where, in other words, it makes the same mistake, all right, I think you have to correct those one at a time. I have not found a way yet to make it correct and then transfer across. So, for example, I have 4 copies of my contact card. If I wanted to change all 4 of them, I would have to select each one and change it. With my brothers and my uncles who have the same last name, I can't correct it once and make it change all of them. I've got to go through that process on every one that it mispronounces. But it does a pretty good job after that of pronouncing it correctly. So that's one fix for it. I'm going to keep looking and see if I see some additional fixes, because I know that can be really annoying when some people really don't take too kindly to having their name mispronounced. I'm kind of used to it, but some people really get annoyed by that. So that's one fix for you. One of the annoyances of dealing with Siri. I think one of these days I'm going to do an entire show with tips for Siri, because you either love it or you hate it, and a lot of it depends entirely on how you're using it. All right. Finally, I included a link here to several different tips. These are iPhone and Android. Most of the tips apply to both iPhone and Android, or iOS, I should say, and Android. There are a few of the tips in this list that are unique to Android, and a few that are unique to iPhone. So get a look at that. A lot of useful information there, and I'm sure you'll enjoy those tips and tricks. And then finally, last thing I want to touch on for tonight, Kirk McLaren, aka Kirk the iTunes guy, somebody that I normally go to for iTunes information. Once again, this time I'm not dealing with iTunes with Kirk, and he posted about a week ago, a little less than a week ago, on the Intego security blog, 12 different ways to open files on a Mac. Double clicking, of course, drag and drop, opening files from the keyboard, opening files from the open dialog, and several others, opening from the dock, using Spotlight. I put those in there because we have quite a few switchers on the forum, and I thought they might appreciate knowing that that there are more than one way to take care of those. So have a look at that, read through the tips. They're pretty straightforward, and it will be a good primer. You're going to find that some of the tips are better in some situations. Sometimes I prefer to double click. Sometimes I'll use the open dialog. It just depends on how well I know where a certain file is. I very rarely use the trick of searching through Spotlight to open a file. I probably should. That might be a little faster. So take a look at those, see what you think, and hopefully I'll be able to dig up a few more interesting things like that for you. As I said, the link to everything we talked about tonight is in the show notes. I'll be putting those up shortly. They should be up within the hour. Hopefully everything will go well there. And that's going to just about do it for this week's show, guys. I know we had quite a bit of stuff. I ran through it kind of quickly. So the text of all the stuff, the tips, the links to where they came from, all of that's in the show notes. Hopefully you enjoy it. I'm going to try to get the corrected November 5th broadcast up sometime this week. If I don't get that done, I'm going to do like some kind of bonus this week in celebration of Thanksgiving. I hope that all of you who do celebrate the day will have a wonderful holiday. Enjoy it. Stay tuned. We might have a little Mac Forum Turkey Day bonus for you. Hopefully you'll enjoy your holiday. And after you had a bit of turkey, you might find a bonus tip or trick or two going up in the forum thread. And as usual, I've enjoyed bringing this information to you. I hope that you find it useful. And if you have a tip, something that you want me to talk about in the next or in a future show, let me know. You can post a comment in the forum thread. I'm Sly Dude on the forum. If you want to send me a PM, you can do it that way. I usually read any that I get. I don't always get to answer. Most of the time I do, but every once in a while I get something that is I just can't answer to for one reason or another. Spam or something like that. So don't worry. If you have an idea, post it in the forum. And until next week, this has been your host, Sylvester Rock, aka Sly Dude. I'll see you in the forum.